If you're listening to this episode and are finding it useful, engaging, informative, and helpful in any way, please consider following the podcast on Spotify. And if you're more of a YouTube user, please feel free to subscribe, like, and share. And drop a comment if you had any thoughts or questions. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. In today's episode, I wanted to briefly talk about some of the diet protocols that I've leveraged in the past, primarily keto and carnivore. Of course, these protocols are quite popular. Everybody's heard about them. Quite a lot of different people have tried them out and spoken in length. But just wanted to share my experience with it, really. So to start off with keto, which I kind of tried in 2016. Keto, obviously, in a nutshell, is a predominantly fat-focused diet, right? You eat fat products across the board, and I think the breakdown works out to be 70% fat, 20% protein, 10% carbohydrate. When I started doing keto, the initial benefits were, of course, noticeable. I did find a lot of mental clarity. I did find some weight loss, whether that was fat loss or just, a combination of water and fat and other aspects. I'm not entirely sure, but I did drop, weight, I guess, from a scale perspective. But over time, I did start noticing some sort of hiccups for myself with keto. Aside from just the restrictive aspect of not being able to eat carbohydrates, in a bigger amount. I also noticed some sort of odd pain around my gallbladder area, and I think I had looked into it at that point, and it's primarily to do with the fact that the gallbladder is responsible for breaking down fat, I believe, in your digestive system. And so I think it was sort of on overdrive at one point. So that was one side effect or sort of noticeable issue that I found. And of course, the other was I was noticing in terms of the cycling that I was doing with keto. So keto initially works out to be where you move on to this way of eating and you have to go through an adaptation phase, because if you've never had a fat focused diet, your body is not used to leveraging fat as a fuel source. So it takes a bit of time, and people have probably mentioned and you've probably heard of the keto flu, etc. And so there is that initial adaptation phase where I think for the first 2 to 3 weeks, I, focused 7 days a week on keto. Truthfully, for me, the flu aspect wasn't so profound, so noticeable. I don't know why exactly. I think it just ranges from person to person. But for me, the adaptation phase was fine. But afterwards, the framework that I was following was a cyclical keto framework, which was 5 days on, 2 days off. So 5 days on, happens, but then when the 2 days off comes, you tend to overdo it a little. At least I did with the carbohydrates and the sugar, right? Because you're off of it for so much that the kick that you get out of sugar is sort of much more noticeable. But also the crash was also very profound as well. So I think I tried keto ultimately for about 3-4 months, which was, I think, longer than I initially anticipated. Had some benefits, but overall, I kind of got to the point where I realized it wasn't very practical for me. I know a lot of people, especially online in the fitness community, that leverage a keto diet, and it works really well for them. And I mean, there are truthfully other benefits to keto as well. Like, as I mentioned, the mental clarity, but also people who have epilepsy. Actually, the diet was initially developed for people who were having epilepsy. For whatever reason, a fat-focused diet reduced seizures and epilepsy and sort of other issues in that kind of spectrum of brain issues. And so there's still probably a lot of people who can benefit from keto, but I think it really does depend on, what your goals are and how it works for you when when and if you try it. So moving on to carnivore. Carnivore for me was a very interesting sort of experiment, because I like eating protein. I like eating meat. And so I felt quite free in being able to eat whatever I wanted, as long as it was from a animal based, as long as it was animal based, essentially, right? There are sort of pure carnivorists, which is no carbohydrates at all, and then there's sort of the adaptive carnivores, I guess, which is some incorporate fruit. Some might say, you know what, not fruit, but only honey, because honey is technically an animal product, but it is, a carbohydrate. And so there's that sugar source that gives you sort of energy and keeps your electrolyte balance in check. So, it really does depend. What I did initially was pure carnivore, and I think I did it for a month, and I spoke about this in my last podcast about how you look versus how you feel. When I did carnivore in 2021, that was the leanest I got. And at that time, all I was doing was eating steak. From time to time, I'd incorporate bacon, sausage, eggs, seafood, any animal product really, because again, the way it works out to be is because you're eating a protein heavy diet, your body doesn't primarily use protein as a fuel source. It primarily looks for fat and carbohydrates. And so I think the reality ends up being that your body then needs to take whatever fat that's coming from these protein sources and use that for energy, and whatever else, it just sort of taps into your fat stores and your reserves, right? And it was great. As I said, I lost weight, I leaned out, but again, it was very restrictive. And it got to a point where I would, eat some carbs and I would sort of put back on a lot of weight, or at least I felt like I did. And that was primarily because of the water, right? So as with keto, with carnivore, when you're doing this, you lose a lot of water weight because, as I've mentioned, before, carbohydrates hold a lot of water. And so if you have carbohydrates, your body will hold on to that water, and you will sort of look and feel, fuller from a muscle perspective. And again, that's not fat. It does add to the weight from a scale perspective, and just the fullness that you might see, in the mirror. So whenever I did deviate from carnivore, I felt this swing, which wasn't really great for me. And ultimately, again, the workout regimen that I was doing at that point was just cardio, right? I wasn't weight training, and I'm still curious to some degree to see how that would have worked out. There has been small gaps where I've been carnivore and I've worked out, but the trick, at least for myself, I've found is that I still do want a little bit of carbohydrates to work out, because you feel a little weaker and a little depleted when you're going to the gym and doing resistance training without any glycogen or glucose in your system, because your body does start learning to break down some fat and convert it into sugar. I believe the process is called gluconeogenesis, and you can look that up in detail online. But it takes a lot of adaptation, and you still do feel that level of depletion where you're like, I don't get the same kind of pump. I don't feel like the same level of strength or push when you're working out, right? So I think ultimately I tried it for a month. I found some benefits, but afterwards I kind of went back to a bit more of a well-rounded diet, you could say. And so that kind of gets me to where I'm at now, which is sort of full circle, because I'm now eating a balanced diet of everything, and I've gotten far less restrictive with myself, because I think one of the things I, finally realized, which was pretty self-evident, is whatever seems to be most practical, sustainable, and sort of repeatable, right? Whatever you can adhere to the most easily, or at least the most consistently, seems to be the best option, because you end up gaining results steadily over time, right? So keto and carnivore were great for me, but it was quick results, but also those quick results sort of diminished quickly as well the moment I deviated from them. And so now, I do eat whatever I want, but I still have a focus on protein. And I mean, I think from that perspective, when you start weight training, you have that realization that you do need to feed your body adequately. So you're basically breaking down your muscles when you work out. you need to repair your muscles, and primarily you would need protein to repair your muscles. And then it's really about figuring out your split of carbohydrates and fat. And it's tricky because there's a couple of different ways to go about this. You can look at calories, which in a nutshell, I am sort of tracking my calories and my macros. And I think that helps because it keeps you at least at a range where you can aim and target towards breaking out your daily food intake and managing what you're eating and what you're trying to fuel your body with. But some people might find that a little tricky. Some people stick purely to calories. Some people stick purely to macros, so that way they don't have to, try and manage both, right? And it really is a point of what works for you. But I think for me, I tend to have a focus of protein and fat and carbohydrates. I think of now much more as a fuel source, as in, what can I eat that will be good for me in terms of fullness, digestion, but also a fuel source when I'm working out the next day or, whenever, right? Because essentially that's the best way for me, at least I found, in looking at carbohydrates. So I predominantly eat fruits as my carbohydrates. I do incorporate honey with a lot of Greek yogurt, which I find is great. And I still do like regular carbs. So pasta, I enjoy. I found like a high fiber pasta that that fits my macros, that I can still incorporate and eat it with, a protein source. And so that keeps my diet varied enough, but also enjoyable enough that I can stick to it and not feel like I'm depriving myself. Right, because I think that's the hardest part with anything, from a sustainability perspective. The moment you feel like you're completely denying yourself, you, by just default, have this notion of, I can't wait to get to that point where I can, indulge in this thing, or, and that always results in going a little too far. It's just because you take something away for so long, when you give it back, you want more of it because you haven't had it for so long, right? Yeah. It's that I'm trying to be mindful of at this point in trying to maintain a routine of diet and exercise that is sustainable. But coupling all of this, there's one thing that all of this sort of fits into, and that for me is intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding. And again, there's nuances to it. You can definitely look it up. There's a lot about this online. I've been now doing intermittent fasting to some degree, I forget, probably since like 2013, 2014, for a long, long time. It's just, for me, it fits. I feel good on it. I rarely feel hungry when I wake up first thing in the morning. My appetite really peaks around noon. And so I've kind of gotten to that, routine of eating between 12 to 8 p.m. or 12 to 6 p.m. sometimes. Ideally, I do like to eat 3-4 hours before I go to sleep, so I feel sort of light when I go to sleep and I have a better sleep. I've noticed that when I eat late and I try to go to sleep, I have very disturbed, broken sleep, right? So I guess what I would say to anybody listening is, try different things out and see how you feel. Obviously, just as a disclaimer, I'll say that please be careful. Please talk to your doctor or physician before you do anything that might potentially have any negative consequences, on you. Whatever I did with sort of research on my own. I didn't particularly feel the need to consult a physician, but I had a calculated approach in how I was trying it, and I felt comfortable taking, that chance and that experiment on myself. But of course, do whatever you feel is safe and sensible for you. But I think from a learning perspective, the best way to figure out what works for you, what works for your body, what you find you can stick to the most, it's really trial and error, right? And so, yeah, give it a shot, try it out, see how it feels, see, how it works for you. Some people find immense benefit in certain, specific diet protocols, right? Whether that's keto, carnivore. I know there's paleo. Some people do paleo. Obviously, some people do vegan. And I used to initially think one versus the other, and this is good and that's good. And I kind of finally realized it really is up to the person. I think everybody has a little bit of variability in that certain things work really well for some people and certain things don't. But overall, I think most people seem to be, optimal when they have a bit of an omnivore approach, right? So you have some meat, you have some vegetables, and of course grains and whatever else, across that spectrum. That gives you a bit of everything and kind of gets you sort of the supplements and the vitamins and the minerals that you need to sort of live healthily. And if you're curious about finding out more, regarding keto or carnivore or a whole bunch of, other health related issues and topics, there are really great channels and podcasts online that you can check out. Some people that I keep a close eye on is Andrew Huberman. He's really great, very well educated, and has a lot of great information across the board on things. Peter Attia is also another individual that shares a lot of great advice. He's also an MD, so he comes at it from very much a medical perspective as well. There's also Sean Stevenson. He has a lot of great information regarding a variety of health topics. In carnivore specifically, Paul Saladino has been sort of in the forefront of championing, this model and this protocol. And if you're curious to learn more about carnivore specifically, Paul Saladino is a channel and is a person that you could benefit a lot from by checking out. Sean Baker is also another avid proponent of carnivore. And for keto, one of the channels that I stumbled on a while back was Health Coach Kate. She had a lot of great information. And so, yeah, again, across the board, there's so many podcasters, so many, fitness individuals that you can find on, YouTube, Spotify, where have you, that will be able to give a lot more detailed information on some of these topics. If you're interested, definitely worth checking them out. Yeah, so that's all I really wanted to talk about on this podcast. But I wanted to do it just because I know I was bringing up some aspects of diet and, certain benefits to, focusing on how you feel versus how you look. And it's all coupled, right? It's tied into food. It's tied into exercise. So that's why I wanted to do this real quick. All right, so that's it for this episode. Until the next time, take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.